In this video, I am going to be revealing my trading strategy. So many of you guys have been asking me, hey, we see you making profit, you're posting your P&Ls, we see you have consistency, can you show us your strategy? So many people are scamming us and having us pay for discords and all of this. Can you just show us how to make money from the stock market? So it took me a long time to be able to find consistency. I want to make that journey a little bit easier for you guys. So I'm going to be revealing my strategy. I'm going to be going over 5 parts in this video. I'm going to make it simplified so you don't get too confused and overwhelmed. And maybe in later videos, I'm going to go more in detail on each part. So this video is going to consist of these 5 parts. Number 1 is economic news. Number 2 is market sentiment. Number 3 is how to find the right trades. Number 4 is how to make key zones when you find the right stocks. And number 5 is how to execute and find the right contracts. If that sounds exciting, make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, and let's jump into this video. All right, guys. So like I said, before I start to trade anything at all, the first thing that I need to do is make sure I don't get blindsided, which means I need to see what reports are being released by the feds, if there's huge economic news, anything like that, because that will affect your trades. They might make it so that your trades may go the opposite way because of what news was just released. So I need to make sure I don't get blindsided. So for this, what I do is I go on investing.com. So I go on investing.com and then I go to news and economic calendar. Once I go on that, I go on the economic calendar and I filter so that I see just a couple things. I see just United States and I see all of these categories: employment, balance, credit, inflation, everything. And then for importance, I select the third one. So I want to see the most important reports that are being released. So we can see once we click this, it takes a second to load. And we can see for yesterday, we had some economic reports. We had average hourly earnings. We had non-farm payrolls. We had an unemployment rate, and all of these were released at 8:30 a.m., so an hour before the market opened. So this is very important. Before I start trading, I can see, okay, unemployment rate came in at 3.9%. The forecast was 3.7%, and that's kind of straightforward, which means unemployment is a little bit higher than what was expected, right? And then I can also see non-farm payrolls. These are open jobs. When you click on it, it'll give you more information, but these are open jobs or jobs that were created in the last month. So we can see the forecast was 198,000 and it came in at 275,000. So that tells me, okay, there were more jobs created in the US than expected. That is really good for the markets, but also unemployment is higher. So a lot of jobs were created, but a lot of people are still unemployed, but unemployment is at a very low level. Less than 4% of people are unemployed. So now I have this in the back of my head, and then I see, okay, how is this going to affect the markets? Now that we got that out of the way, I go on to TradingView. And this is step number 2 in what I do before I start trading. I want to find the right stocks to trade, right? So we can obviously just select any stock and decide to trade that. But what happens is a lot of times you might get caught in a lot of sideways trading, right? You don't want to get caught in something like this where the markets are just going side to side. You want to be there for these type of days when the markets drop hard or they're rallying hard or there's great opportunities. And the way we do this is we find stocks that have volume. So what I do is I go on my stock screener right on TradingView. And once I go on this, I have a one that I created, And these are the filters that I put on it so that it shows me the best stocks to trade. So the first thing is I like stocks that are above $100. Sometimes I trade below that, but above $100 is where I feel most comfortable. Number 2 is a large market cap, so 200 billion and above. I want to trade the big names, the Nvidias, the Teslas, the S&P 500, Netflix, AMD. Those are the ones that people trade. Those are the ones that are the most liquid, that have the most volume. Those are the ones that I want to be trading. So market cap above 200 billion. And then this is the most important things. Volume, I put 3 million. You can change that around, but this is the most important thing, this last category, which is relative volume at time. So this says I want to see stocks that are trading at a higher volume than they usually do. So if it is 1, that means it's average. So I'll show you an example. So Nvidia, for example, we can see here Nvidia trades at about let me see, volume. Let's add volume here. Okay, here we do. All right, so we can see Nvidia has about 114 million for volume, right? And it is telling us that's the volume today, 114 million. That's the current volume. And it's telling us relative volume at time is 1.49 currently, which means Nvidia is trading at 1.5 times more than it usually does. We can see Costco is trading at 3.5 times the average volume it usually does. So these are the stocks that I want. I want relative volume above 1, which means stocks are trading above their average volume, which tells me people are interested and we may see some moves in these stocks, right? So, and then from this category, I usually select certain names that I'm most comfortable trading. And for me, it is Tesla, Nvidia, AMD, Netflix, the Qs, the S&P 500. Those are the ones I'm most comfortable trading. That's what I have been trading for a long time. And I try to find a basket of stocks so I can learn their characteristics and see how they move. So one of the ones here was AMD, and that is a stock I like to trade. And that is one of the stocks that I traded. And this takes us to step number 3, which is finding key zones. So we went over economic news, we went over how to find the right stocks, and then now how to find key zones from those stocks. I'm not gonna break down every stock here. All I do is I look at this, I'm like, okay, I'm interested in Nvidia, AMD, those are the ones I like. So we can go on here and we can look at AMD. So I'm gonna get rid of everything here and let's go back into replay mode and we'll go to pre-market. So this is, let's see. So we're gonna replay as if it's basically the day before almost, right? So what I do is I find key zones, key areas that I want to trade off of, right? So I use this indicator right here. It's called dynamic support resistance zones. This indicator gives me volume by price levels, right? So what this means is it tells me, okay, Nvidia has the most volume at this price. Nvidia has the most volume at this price for the current time period. And for the settings for this indicator, the only thing that I changed was the number of pivots. I think the default is 50. I changed it to 100. That's it. And what I do is I go on the 4-hour time frame and I work my way down. So I turn the indicator on and I see what key zones this is showing me. And I like to just highlight it. So you can either put horizontal lines, whatever you like. But for me, I just like to put these dashed lines. It just looks cool to me, right? So if the price is above, we're gonna make it red. If the price is below, we're gonna make it green for support and resistance. So we start from the 4-hour time frame, and then I go to the 1-hour time frame. We let the thing load, and we see what other zones it gives us, and it pretty much gives us the same zones, right? And I'll still put lines here just so I know, okay, this is resistance and support for both the 4-hour and the 1-hour. And then I don't like to go to the 30-minute time frame just because most traders don't trade on a 30-minute time frame. Usually they look at the daily, the 4-hour, the 1-hour, the 15 minutes, the 5 minutes. Those are the more popular, right? So now I go to my 15-minute time frame and I can see, okay, it's telling me that there's some volume here. For this one, I'm gonna change the color to blue. So I know, okay, now I'm getting to lower time frames, right? So now we're trading at lower time frames. So I want to know where those zones are, but to know that it's a lower time frame. And then finally, I'm looking at the 5-minute time frame. And for the 5-minute time frame, we can just make these horizontal lines. Obviously, everything I'm doing here is up to you. Whatever you feel most comfortable with, whatever is aesthetically pleasing to you, right? And I know we have just a bunch of colors everywhere, but all of this is gonna make sense. So now I turn the indicator off, and this is what I have for the day. So I'm coming into the trading day on Friday, and this is what I see. So this tells me a lot. What does this tell me? This tells me, okay, AMD has been trading kind of sideways between these key zones. And if we break out of either zone, this thing can move, right? If we drop below 205, this thing can start dropping to 200 and the 190s. And if this thing breaks above 214, 215, we can see this thing move higher. And the smart trade is to wait for a breakout from either zone. AMD is currently at or around all-time highs. So I want to wait for a breakout of this zone and this thing can move, right? So once we turn off the replay mode, we can see how did AMD play out. It came to this 214 zone and we finally broke out of here, and we can see those buyers stepped in heavy. This trade above 215 would have netted you a huge winner, right? So this thing moved 5% to the upside. Huge trade. And then we can see even for the downside, this thing came to this key zone down here, right? And I'll tell you guys why it found support here in a second. But we can see it came here and it found support at the 205 and bounced back up here, found resistance, came back down here, and we can see that possibly next week this thing can maybe make a way down to $200. But now, why did this thing find support here versus here? It kind of did a little bit, but why did it find support here? And the reason is because we can see that there are not a lot of key zones or volume in this area, which means for this thing to push from here to here will require a lot of volume. It'll require a lot of sellers to push this thing down, right? This is a huge gap, right? A huge gap to move down, and it's going to require a good amount of volume to push this thing down. And the same way with this. Once we break out of this, this required a lot of volume to push this thing out, and we can see that volume did come in, but it did not come in here to push this thing lower. So now, how am I able to determine once this thing breaks out if this is going to move higher, if it's going to move lower? And this takes us to our final step, which is the execution part. So we have our key zones. Once we see this thing break out, I like to look at two things, right? So I love volume, right? Volume is what moves markets. So I like to add VWAP. And once I add VWAP, I can look and see, okay, this thing is breaking out of this key zones and we are above VWAP, which means this thing can absolutely move, right? And then number two is I look at Bookmap. So I've went over Bookmap a bunch of times, but I can go over it again in another video. But Bookmap is basically a platform that shows you where buyers and sellers are sitting in the market. So if we take a look at AMD, I'm not sure if it'll show me. I'd have to be in replay mode, so I can't really see here, but it kind of gives me zones like this where there are buyers, and on this particular day, once AMD broke out of here, on Bookmap, I saw a lot of buyers. My trade, personally, I did not take a great trade. I was a bit hasty, and what I did was I shorted AMD right here, and I took a stop loss right here. So it was a dumb trade. I just took it without really paying attention. But if I looked at Bookmaps, I would see once this thing broke out of here, a lot of buying pressure came in AMD. So that's AMD. We can also use this for any stock, right? So I make sure I make all of my key zones, all of my areas in right before the market opens, and see how stocks react off of these zones. We can take a look at Tesla. This is something that I marked out on Friday as well. And on Friday, I had all of these zones for Tesla. So I want to quickly go over where if you are a beginning trader, where you might have failed on Tesla, whereas if you have a little bit of experience, you might have been a little bit smarter, right? So just say you were a beginner trader who doesn't make key zones or anything like that, and the markets open up and you see this. So markets open up and this is what you see. You see, okay, Tesla kind of struggled to break above 180, and right now it broke up to 183. This is awesome. When the markets open up, I'm taking calls on Tesla, and I know this thing is probably going to 200, and what happens? Tesla sells off and you're confused. What happened? You know, and what happened was this. When we look at the key zones that I made in pre-market, there's a couple things that we can see. Tesla has a great support area right here at 180. I mean, a strong resistance right here at 180. We can see this has happened a few times, right? So we can see that 180 zone has been a strong resistance level for Tesla. And you would think, okay, we broke above 180. We're in the clear. This thing is moving higher. But what we don't pay attention to is, no, there is this zone at 183 right here that Tesla needs to break above first. So as long as we are below this 185 area, Tesla is still bearish, right? Once we break above this 185 area, yes, then Tesla can start testing 190. But until then, we are still bearish. And we can see in pre-market, Tesla came and it came into this zone and it began the resistance and the push back down already. And that is exactly what happened. We start pushing down. We come to this other key zone and buyers are deciding, or the market is deciding if it's going to support this area, but sellers were too much. It pushed above it for a second, but sellers were too much and they pushed this thing lower and they pushed it right to that 175 support area. And we can see now we're trading below that 175 as well. And now we are going towards 172 area. So we need to be making sure we are choosing the right contracts as well when we are going into these trades. And I see this video is already reaching above 20 minutes. So maybe I'll make that in another video, how to select the right contracts. But right now, guys, make sure you got your economic news, you're picking stocks with volume, you're making your key zones, and you are paying attention to where you are on this portrait called the stock market chart. All right, peace.